Hi, I'm Alan Tatro with Global Sugar Art, and today I'd like to teach you how to stencil on a cake. Stenciling has been around for a very long time, and there are several companies that create stencils and have them available on the market, and I have my own line of stencils as well. Over the last couple years, I've developed several different stencils for different size cakes. For instance, this would be used for a much deeper cake, often the bottom tier of a large cake. You can also cut stencils any way you want. So if I like this pattern, but I only wanted to use the middle section, I can just draw a line on here and take a pair of scissors and cut it to fit whatever cake I'm using. Over the last year, with the resurgence of Art Deco in the market, I've also created an entire line of stencils specifically for the Art Deco market. So I'd like to take a minute and show you how to stencil on the side of a square cake and on the top, and then I'll give you a quick demo on how stenciling is done on a round cake by yourself. Frequently when you're stenciling on a round cake, and sometimes on a square cake, it requires another person to hold the stencil for you while you apply the royal icing. And we have a technique that can let you do it all by yourself. So just give me 1 second and we'll get everything together here for you. Okay, we're going to choose a stencil to use on today's cake. Oh, put these aside. I guess I already have it on the cake. So I'm going to do this one on the top, and on the side I've already chosen a stencil. Now, one of the tricks you can do with a square cake is you can actually put some toothpicks in to sort of hold it in place while you start applying the royal icing. Now, stenciling is generally done with royal icing. You can also use an airbrush. You can use cocoa butter and a stipple sponge and just dab it on. You can actually use like a gel paste color and use a stipple sponge with that as well. But the traditional is a royal icing. So I have some royal icing all made up. Made it a nice bright color so everybody could see it. And I want you to see the consistency here. This is a soft royal icing. When you make royal icing, the instructions generally are to prepare it to a stiff peak. And you would do that, but then just give it a little bit more water before you're ready to apply it to your stenciling so that you have a little bit softer peak. So that's the consistency you're looking for. If the icing is too stiff and too dry, when you go to remove your stencil, it leaves like a raised stenciling design that's hard to sand down. Sometimes it leaves trails. When you pull the stencil off, it'll leave marks. So it's important to get the icing the right consistency. Now, for applying the royal icing, one of my favorite ways in the past to do this was I would take a regular bowl scraper that you can buy from most bakery supply houses, and I would cut it in a strip. And then these strips are then very flexible and small, and they're easy to work with. Since then, I've worked with a company to develop our own line of stencil applicators that are very thin and very flexible. So this is what I'm going to be using today. So stenciling is very easy. We're going to start, I'm just going to remove the end toothpick here and hold that in place. Take a little bit of royal icing. There, I want to get that lined up at the bottom. And then I'm going to start applying this in a very thin coat. Once you have some royal icing on the cake, the toothpicks can come out and the stencil will stay in place. So now I can remove this one. And we'll go a little bit further. Notice I'm not using a lot of icing. I'm keeping it to a minimum. And then we'll remove the last one. There. Now I just want to go back and make sure that I've covered everything. And that looks pretty good. And then we'll get a focus on there, and I'll show you how we just lift that right off. and you should have a perfectly stenciled design right on the side of the cake. So that's how to do the side of a square cake using the toothpicks to hold the stencil in place while you apply the stencil, or while you apply the royal icing. Now, the top can be done very similarly. And maybe it would help to see better if I move this like that. Now, the same thing. On the top, I'm going to center my stencil, and I'm just going to put in a couple toothpicks. And because they're where the icing is going to be, the hole in the cake will never show. So I'll start on the back here. If you have a lot of stenciling to do on a large cake, what I recommend you do is do one section on a tier and then do a section on the next tier, and then if you have 3 or 4 tiers, do one on each tier, allowing the first tier to dry. And by the time you finish the second or third tier, usually the first tier is dry enough, you can realign your stencil and continue around the cake. And there we go. The top is all done and ready to take off. And there we go. And there is a perfectly stenciled design right on the top of a cake. So you can see how easy stenciling is and what an impact it has on a cake. It's a very classic tradition, a very classic method of decorating, and you can get beautiful results with it. I'd like to show you how to do a round cake now. Now, since I've already shown you how to apply the royal icing, I'll just show you how to apply the stencil to a cake to hold it. Okay. This is a cake that I've already done, obviously. It's already been stenciled, and the stencil has been attached with a band. Now, you can go to any pharmacy or drugstore and buy this hurt-free stretch wrap. It's made by Johnson & Johnson, and it's a sterile fabric that's stretchy. And all I did was I took my stencil and I taped it to both ends of the stencil. Now, normally I wouldn't have a pre-decorated cake to work with, so I wouldn't have to worry about going over the flowers like this. But basically, you're going to line up the stencil however you want it on your cake, and the wrap is going to hold it right in position. Now, I chose on this stencil only to fill in the middle part. I decided I didn't want the top and bottom edge. So you can be pretty free with the stencils and use whatever part you want. So what I did was I used my white royal icing. I went over this. I then removed the tape on one side. And remember, that would have been stuck to the cake. And then I just peeled that away. And then you need to let that royal icing dry for about 10 minutes, maybe 15, depending on your humidity. And then reattach your fabric band, put it around the cake, line it up, and then reattach it with a piece of tape. So this allows you to do the stenciling all by yourself with no help from anybody else holding the stencil and wiggling it on you and getting you mad. That does happen. Just a note on this cake, this is a question I frequently get asked when I do a cake like this at a demonstration or I bring one to a show. How did I get this effect on a cake? This particular cake, it was a very pale yellow fondant, and I did a white royal icing on the stencil. I allowed that to dry. Then I used super pearl dust and a little bit of spirits like vodka or gin, or you can use lemon extract. Mix the two together, and then I painted over all the stenciling. Once that was dry, I used our Global Sugar Art Twinkle Dust, which is a glitter dust, and I added a little bit of alcohol to that and a very small brush, and I went on and I just dabbed that on the cake, right on the stenciling. So I get a nice pearlized, glittery effect on that cake. So that is the basics of stenciling. There are so many of them on the market. They're very easy to use. And please go to Global Sugar Art and check out our entire lines of stencils. Thank you for watching.